The victims of systems of abuse and power are the ones who often end up taking the brunt of the blame for the symptoms of them. After all, that is a large factor of how they protect themselves. They can never be at fault for the issues they cause, even when they directly cause them in order to protect themselves and their interests. Any admission of guilt would be to allow their empires to crumble before their eyes. The first generation of Pokemon's main antagonistic force is Team Rocket, who use their resources and their time to kidnap and steal Pokemon. The ethical quandary of whether or not anyone can truly own anything, let alone living sentient creatures such as Pokemon, aside, it's not a stretch to believe that most members of Team Rocket join the organization due to being in poverty. That's the reason why they turn to crime. They simply can't afford the cost of living in the Kanto region otherwise. But most members of Team Rocket are not the person in charge of Team Rocket, the one who's really behind the operations that the group carries out. Giovanni, Team Rocket's kingpin, is the main villain of Pokemon Red and Blue. In many ways, he's a stereotypical and completely flat, corrupt crime boss. He simply seems to be motivated with motivation itself. He wants Pokemon for no real reason that is conveyed in the game's text directly. He's evil through and through, and while there is some frankly unnecessary depth to his character that is conveyed in later entries in the series as it stands in the first generation, he is a paper-thin standard conceptualization of a crime boss, someone exploiting the poor using his vast wealth. Except there's something about Giovanni and his wealth that I have yet to mention that adds an interesting wrinkle to Pokemon's text and its politics. One of the biggest plot twists in the game, well, as big as a Pokemon plot twist can be anyway, is that Giovanni is a gym leader. Not only is the means through which he commands his syndicate of working-class citizens a position of high social esteem, it's one that, for all intents and purposes, is governmentally sanctioned. Giovanni is functionally a CIA operative hired solely to create the false threat of Team Rocket for socio-political reasons. His motives are vague because they are inherently disingenuous. He doesn't want what he claims to want. He is simply a puppet of the larger Kanto governing body. Giovanni doesn't even face any form of penalty by said state for his crimes. He simply escapes into the unknown somewhere by the end of the game. All in all, he's protected by Kanto. So we know now that Team Rocket, in large part, is functionally a Kanto government intelligentsia scheme to create stigma against poor people, and that Giovanni is both their strongest asset in this regard as a gym leader, and also their number one scapegoat, even if he manages to get off without so much as a slap on the wrist by the end of the game. With that all being said, what does Pokemon Red and Blue as a text itself think of all this? Who does it choose to shoulder the blame of these massive systemic issues on? The answer is pretty obvious. The low-level grunts of Team Rocket. While Giovanni receives no real consequences for any of his actions in the game, and the Pokemon League doesn't either for orchestrating the whole affair, members of Team Rocket who joined the Syndicate out of pure desperation have been completely left out to dry. Even a few years later, in the events of Gold and Silver, we see the stragglers clinging together to some hope, some vague ideal of Giovanni that can supposedly bring them to a better life. And even though their fate is left uncertain after this point, we do know one thing for sure. Pokemon doesn't care about them. Pokemon only cares about maintaining the neoliberal status quo that created Team Rocket in the first place. It prioritizes the systemic abuser over the systemic victim, which of course would set a stark precedent for every game in the series that followed it. And how could it be anything else? The dynamics of the core of Pokemon's gameplay are of the owner and the owned, the oppressor and the oppressed. No wonder the series would never meaningfully question societal power dynamics. The gameplay loop reinforces them inherently through the act of subjugating Pokemon to use. Pokemon is the ultimate status quo, and its juvenile portrayal of crime is just one facet of that larger whole. This has been our Occasioned Everlasting, whose favorite Pokemon is Frostlass because I think it's pretty, signing off. Thank you for watching.